Just before we get into the new material, I just want to go over a couple quick things here. You might have noticed I split week 3, 4 up into separate folders because there's quite a bit of material we're covering here. I want to give it a bit more organization. Plus, you might have also noticed that that little recording I did at the end of last week on how to kind of debug errors in your seed data and so on. I've moved that actually into the week 4 area here now because I do have the separate areas. So what are we doing next? Well, we're going to do yet another many-to-many, right? We just did one using checkboxes, but this time we're going to use list boxes instead. Then we're going to get into the age-old requirements of any database application: filtering, sorting, and finally paging, right? That's the real focus of the material this week. Let me emphasize once more that really week 3, during that up to there, we covered everything you actually need for project part 1, right? So this material I'm covering now in week 4, this will be related to the next part of the project work that we're going to be starting soon. Not quite yet, but soon, right? Just a note here as well, we're also going to be looking at bootstrap collapse. We've already done some work. We showed the tool tips, how we could, say for the medical trials, just have a simple word like yes or no show up on the screen, hover over and you get a nice tool tip with the actual full name of the medical trial, things like that, right? Okay, I have some links right down here as we go into step 6 now. Our new many-to-many, but this time using list boxes, right? But we're going to be, as we go through this, introducing a few new of the bootstrap components, right? Besides tooltip, here's the collapse. Collapse is a very nice feature when you want to, have stuff available at the fingertip, so to speak, or the mouse click on the screen, but, have it disappear, right, if you don't need to be seeing it, right? So we're going to make good use of the collapse in a couple of different ways. Also, we're getting more into the grid system as well, right? It's been there. You might have noticed it. And of course, you did some references to it and some work with it in your 10-part tutorial. But here we're going to be starting to expand our own use of basically the grid system with our responsive breakpoints and the 12 columns that there are and so on, logical columns in any row and things like that, right? So there's a lot more about the grid system. It's a bigger topic, but the collapse itself shouldn't take too long. We'll be able to introduce that as we go along. All right, let's get started then. So what I have running here is the actual application. Oh, up and going. I am running it, I believe. Yeah, hang on one second. There we are, right. So you might say, okay, we've already done a many-to-many here. We have our cancer, cardiac disease. These are check boxes we could check off for Fred here. But let me just, a couple things I want to point out. We have here, about a dozen or so check boxes for different conditions in a person's medical history. Not too bad, right? It's easily manageable, not too challenging. But imagine now having, 2 dozen, 3 dozen, a dozen check boxes on the screen. Wow, if you've got a lot of options, right, that are basically yes or no options, after a certain point, checkboxes really become unmanageable, right? My rule of thumb basically is, a dozen's fine, 15, 20 at most, I would probably attempt, perhaps with checkboxes, but anything beyond that, you really have to go to an alternate style here, right? So let me just go back to the list. So while we go through that, I'm going to point out as well, see if I did come in here and let's say for Fred, I check off a bunch more things. Who knows what, all this medical history stuff. Now look at how much room this is taking up this list on the screen, especially on the index view where we want to keep things nice and succinct. But, even on details view, things like that, we're getting a pretty big long list here, right? Worst here. So that's one reason why, just to mention ahead, we're going to introduce the bootstrap collapse so we can make this whole list available on the screen, but have it so that it's not taking up all that screen real estate. So a few issues we're going to be addressing here as we go through. Too many, right? Choices for checkboxes, etc. Right? So here, our medical office model again. You could argue, wait a second, we've already done a many-to-many. We don't really need to repeat that lesson. But this time we're doing it over again, this time with Doctor Specialties. Exactly the same arrangement here. Our associative or intersection entity is a no load. No load means there's no additional properties in it other than 2 foreign keys which make up the primary key. The reason we added this second example of a many-to-many, a no load many-to-many, was because there are a lot more Doctor Specialties. I think in my seed data I've got well over 60 different specialties. So that's just too much to handle with checkboxes. Okay. All right, let's get into the nitty gritty now. So I just ran the application, right? So we've seeded our data, we have the database. You know, one of the things I'll often do then is come down here. We did all this nice work creating our initializer with all these different options. I'm going to change delete database now to false. It will make a huge difference to the speed when I go and test or run the application again. It won't take near as long. I don't have to delete the database, recreate it, use migrations to create all the tables and seed all the data and everything, right? And that's all we really have to do is just change that to false. The seeding of data, it'll see that there's data there and just kind of skip over it a couple quick ifs. If I wanted to, I could make that false as well, but I'm not going to bother making that change right now. That's enough for now to make it much faster starting. Plus, if I do play around, like make some edit changes and so on, and stop and start, those edit changes will be persisted, right, in the database because I'm not dropping it yet again. Just a little tip there to help you while you're developing. All right, so let's get now into the nitty gritty. What are we going to need here for this new many-to-many relationship? Sorry, dogs are barking. Okay, well, I'm going to need some new models, obviously, as well. So let's get to there first, coming to the models folder. This is very much, I'm going to go fairly quickly because it's very much the same as what we did, right, with our last many-to-many with the medical history. So I just have my specialty itself. And the properties that I'm going to put in here are pretty much the same ones, or very similar, not the same, but similar to what we did before. I have my integer identity, okay, simply called ID, the name for the specialty, which I'll use a display name of medical specialty. A note there, required, you can't leave it blank, et cetera, right? And then here is that very important in the parent of a relationship like this, our I collection of the related child objects, or Doctor Specialty objects, which is underlined because we haven't made it yet. So let me just go ahead and add my next class, the actual Doctor Specialty class itself, which, not surprisingly, you know by now, only has two logical things in here, each one taking two properties, the two foreign keys, right? The actual foreign key objects, my nullable doctor, my nullable specialty, and then the required integers to store the actual primary keys, which are now a foreign key within this Doctor Specialty entity itself. Okay, one more thing. Of course, the doctor needs to be aware of and have access to this collection. So let's also add our I collection of Doctor Specialty objects inside here. Okay, slight difference, you notice, between specialty. It's the exact same line of code, but display name, from the specialty point of view, this is the list of doctors. From the doctor point of view, display name specialties, right? There we go. So that gives me the same information here, but it's just going to be displayed from the point of view that is appropriate. All right, so those are the changes to the model classes themselves, but we know we have to make some changes in our DB context, right? So let's come to that next. Come up to the data, medical office context. We have two new DB sets to add here. Okay. Just spacing out for readability. Our specialty, which we'll call specialties, pluralized. That's how you do it in English here. Doctor Specialty, same type of thing, a plural name for the actual DB set. Now, a couple things we know, just as we did with our medical history, there's some logic to think about. Okay, cascade delete. We have basically two relationships here from the two parent objects to the common child, okay, our Doctor Specialty being that common child. If I'm going to delete a parent, say a specialty, would I want to automatically have it go and delete all the Doctor Specialty records? No. Basically, the logic is, no, if a specialty has been accredited or assigned to a doctor, I should not be able to remove it from the system. So I do want to definitely prevent cascade delete going between the specialty and Doctor Specialties. So that'll be delete behavior restrict, right? Thinking about it from the other point of view, from a doctor, if we're actually deleting or removing a doctor, well, yeah, obviously we would want to clean up the information about what specialties that doctor had. The doctor's going to be gone, so why keep that around? That would not make sense. So we don't have to make any changes. The default with a required foreign key is cascade delete. So that should actually take care of that. We do need to add the primary key because remember, okay, it's a composite or a combination of the two foreign keys. So we go the with our model builder into the entity Doctor Specialty, has key, so it'll be the primary key, and we'll make a new anonymous object here made up of the two foreign key integers. And that's it. That's all we need to do in the actual DB context as well. Obviously, we want to think about a new migration, but let's go on to our seed data next. Okay, so coming down to our initializer. Isn't that beautiful the way we got it nicely organized now? We don't need to do anything in the prepare the database area, okay? But we do want to, in terms of actually having the list of specialties, I mean, that's pretty much something that we'd need it in during development, but also in production, the list of specialties. How many doctor specialties are there out there in the world? Well, we might have to add some over time, but we're definitely going to be adding them here in required seed data, right? So I've got some copy-paste code ready to go in my copy-paste file here. To get these in place, I'm just going to copy, come down here. I could do it after conditions, after medical trial. That's perfectly fine. But before the end of the try block, before the catch block here, right? I'll just throw in this bit of code here. Seed specialties, okay, for doctors. So I just, again, have that string array, right? I'm going to use a for each loop to go through all of them. Now, it's a pretty long list. Yeah, there we go. I think I've got, as I said, over 60 specialties in here, right? So we'll just add all those, and that can indeed be part of this region, right? The region here for seed required data. Because that's information we're going to need always in production as well. Now, in terms of sample data, right, I'm going to come right down after we finished adding all our doctors and patients, and even to the point here where after we've added all our doctors, we did this command, right? We did our straight SQL command, right, executing that raw SQL to delete any doctors who don't have any patients assigned, right? So I'm going to add this code right there after that. So I've got all my doctors in place that I actually want to keep at this point in time. Okay, so here we are. I need to refresh, although it's earlier on, I have all my array of doctor IDs. That's why I don't have to have a bar or anything in front of this, because I already created the variable. But I'm going to basically replace it because I have more doctors now than I did the first time around, right? So on my doctors.select, just getting all the primary keys to an array, storing that here. And of course, I need to check the length for a new updated count because I've added more doctors. Similar thing here now for our specialties. Notice I do have to actually create these as specific types because it's my first time using these variable names, specialty IDs. ID, again, is all the primary keys of all the specialties and a count of how many there are. Then I can just loop through all, okay, of the doctor specialties, right? And this IJK business, these are kind of showing my age here. I was a programmer way back in the early days when I was learning computer programming with punch cards, believe it or not. IJK and so on were often used as simple counter variables, right? So I have I as a counter variable to loop through the primary keys of the doctors, J as a counter so we can add some specialties, and K lets us step through all specialties so we can make sure that each gets used, right? So I start off with K as being 0 to start with the first specialty, right? And then for each basically primary key, okay, in all my doctor IDs, right, I'll just go through, I'm going to randomly select up to 10 specialties, anywhere from 1 to 9, basically. Yeah, I should say 9 there, because technically it won't go above, it won't meet 10. I'm not going to bother updating the file, but I'll do it right here. Okay. All right, so I simply have my for loop here, just counting through from J equals 1 to however many we're going to give, the random number. And we just basically then, this is a check to make sure I haven't run out of specialties yet. If I have, if I've used them all up, then I go back to the index 0 in that array and start over again using them, right? So that's what that K is about. And then I just go and I pick the next specialty in order as I go through and add them to my doctors. And that's all there is to that code. So nothing really fun. It's just kind of fun writing this kind of code, thinking about how can I, maybe I want to make sure I use every specialty there is as long as I have enough spots to assign them and so on and so forth. Away we go. And if you find 10 is too many to assign or 9 or 10 to a doctor, then you can change that. All right, so that should take care of all my seating and everything. So let's go ahead and make migrations. So I'm going to do a quick build, make sure I haven't messed up with any of my copy paste, miss the curly brace, things like that. Rebuild all succeeded, it says down in the bottom left. Good. Okay. Well, let's get my common commands. That'll be a help as I come down to my NuGet package manager console, my NuGet package manager. And I will once again add a migration. Now, of course, I might have to start migrations over, okay? But I think because I'm only adding new features here, new entities and things, I probably should get away with it. I'm going to call this one Doc Spec, for short for specialties. And here we go. Okay, so it's creating the table for specialties, primary keys. I think Doctor Specialties just made up those two. And notice that our primary key is the combination of the two. Our two foreign keys are related here as well. Notice one is cascade delete, the other restricts cascade delete, right? Of course, if we delete a doctor, we want to actually delete the record of the specialties of the doctor, etc., right? Okay, all right, so that's good. We should be ready. Let's actually now come back to my common commands. I'm just going to apply this one. I could wait. I mean, I could make sure that I do that by calling the appropriate options when I actually start the program, but I like to do it here so I can see right away, do I have any red or yellow underlining happening here in all the code that's created and executed? Nope, looks like everything went fine, so I'm probably okay, right? All right, good, good. Okay. Yeah, I can close all that. And you know what? I did show you changing it, but I'm going to change it back again now because I do want to make sure I just start fresh. I'm going to delete the database, make sure I reseed everything so it's all set and ready to go next time I go to run. I can try to running it. Make sure I don't get any weird errors or anything. Shouldn't. Do I see anything here? No. There's just that last work we did listing the patients, but no. The doctors might have specialties, but at this stage, I haven't added anything to the actual user interface to show any information about the specialties themselves. Okay, that's going to come next. All right, so let me just stop running. Okay, we're good. Oh, you know one thing, before I stop this, I'm going to stop and start the recording just so it's not too long. But when we come down here, point out this might be helpful as well. Students struggling, right? Struggling with the whole concept of seeding data. Let me just point out here, you can always come in and have a look and see what data you actually managed to get into the different tables. So let me just look here. If I go to edit top 200 rows, look, there's all my 64 specialties. Yep, I got lots of doctor specialties. That all got seeded. Good, good, good. Let's have a look at my doctor specialties. All I have here are the two foreign keys, the integer values for all the foreign keys. But look at that. 131 assignments of different specialties to different doctors. All right. I just want to point that out to you. I should have had that in my, should have shown that when I did that video on how to diagnose errors with seeding. So I just wanted to share that with you. That's a useful way to check and see what actual data did get seeded and what didn't. All right, so we are ready at this point to actually go in. You know what? Now that I ran it once, I can put this back to false. False. I can spell. Honestly, I can when I really try. Okay. All right, I'm just going to save that and close. We're going to stop and start the recording and get into actually building the user interface to show our new many-to-many relationship with some improvements using Bootstrap Collapse and so on.